British lawmakers have voted against adjourning Parliament until the 3rd of October. The governing Conservative Party wanted a brief adjournment to hold their annual conference.
But opposition parties rejected their appeal, saying it's a crucial period as Britain prepares to exit from the European Union. Parliament began sitting again on Wednesday after the Supreme Court ruled against Prime Minister Boris Johnson's decision to suspend it for 5 weeks.
Meanwhile, Johnson says tempers need to calm down over Brexit. This comes amidst a stormy debate after MPs returned to Parliament. Johnson has repeatedly called a new law which will force him to get another extension from the EU as the surrender bill.
His critics say such language is often used in threats of violence, particularly against women. Johnson defended his use of the term, arguing that the legislation would hurt Britain's negotiating stance with the EU. The Brexit deal The deadline is on the 31st of October.
Fair enough to call the Surrender Act what it is. I think it's absolutely reasonable. But you're also right, Peter, that we do need to bring people together and get this thing done. Tempers need to come down and people need to come together, because it's only by getting Brexit done that you'll actually, I think, lance the boil, as it were, of the current anxiety. Well, I must respectfully differ about what I said. There are two very separate things. First is, obviously, it's totally intolerable for MPs, particularly female MPs, to be on the receiving end of abuse and threats. But then there's a separate question, which is, what is it okay to say in Parliament in a metaphorical way to describe a certain bill? And the Surrender Act is a bill that actually makes it impossible for the government of this country to decide how long it must remain in the EU.
For more on the story, we're joined via Skype from Northern Ireland by law professor Dagmar Schiek at Queen's University, Belfast. Dagmar, good evening and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening.
Now, very quickly, what's the impact or the consequences of a no-Brexit deal for Northern Ireland?
Well, very shortly, disastrous, and a bit longer, a no-deal Brexit would mean that connections to the Republic of Ireland are interrupted. That concerns sectors such as electricity, farming, the whole food protection sector, and of course also travels between Northern Ireland and Ireland wouldn't be affected immediately, but anything to do with transport of goods would be affected. So, small examples, winter milk isn't produced in Ireland presently, comes from Northern Ireland. Another very popular example, Guinness beer, probably also known in Johannesburg, travels over the border 5 times before it's sold. It's brewed in Dublin, filled up in Belfast, goes back to Dublin to be etiquetted, and then goes back to Belfast to be packaged, and then is sold elsewhere. So all these corporations, and also cooperation of civil society, will be interrupted immediately if there is no withdrawal agreement with the European Union. And it would be a very bad place to be in.
Now, Prof, what should Northern Ireland be looking forward to with regards to whatever decision is reached in terms of the Parliament currently and the, obviously the divisions and the confusion that's taking place going forward? It's literally a couple of weeks to go before the 31st deadline.
Yes, for Northern Ireland, we need an extension of the deadline because it seems that there is no agreement specifically on the part of the withdrawal agreement which affects Northern Ireland, the protocol on Northern Ireland. And the new government of the UK has not brought forward proposals which can be known. It has brought forward secret proposals. So neither people in Northern Ireland, nor in Ireland, nor in the EU Commission know what these proposals are. What has become known is that these proposals still will interrupt the flow of goods across the border. And so obviously we need a bit more time to agree that. We also have the problem that Northern Ireland doesn't have its own government normally. It's not sitting. And that is a concern to people here because that means they are not heard in the negotiations as well. So that should be reestablished as well. And that needs time. So we can't achieve all this before the 31st of October.
And going forward before the 31st, if things don't happen the way that Northern Ireland is hoping, you're mentioning the fact that there is no sitting government or, a national assembly, so to speak of, in Northern Ireland. What happens going forward before the 31st? What can you put forward?
Well, we can't put forward very much. Our civil service is engaging. And of course, there are also business actors who are in Whitehall most of the time and try to lobby. And human rights organizations are also trying to make the case that we need a protection. Some protections happening. For example, the Republic of Ireland, the state Ireland, has promised to secure the healthcare services for people in Northern Ireland, even if it's no longer the EU. They will take that on their healthcare bill. And both Ireland and the UK have agreed that travel between the two states will remain covered by the common travel area. This only affects British people like myself and Irish people, but not people from other countries. So there's something which needs to be done. And also human rights organizations urge the government to accept the UK government to make it easier for people from other countries to stay in Northern Ireland and to keep commuting between Northern Ireland and Ireland, even in a case of no deal Brexit. But no deal Brexit cannot be mitigated. It can be mitigated, but it will still be a catastrophe.
Worst case scenario for Northern Ireland?
Thank you. The worst case scenario is a withdrawal agreement not happening. The worst case scenario is on the 31st of October, the Northern Ireland and the UK falling out of the EU without an agreement. On that, personally, for example, it's a question: where do we get fuel for our heating? It's a question: can we still drive to the Republic? And that's a question which concerns many people, especially those farmers who have a farm which straddles the border, or the people who live in Ireland and work in Northern Ireland and the other way around. And this is quite a number. It's more than 300,000 people who cross the border every day.
And what's the best case scenario that Northern Ireland could be hoping for by the 31st of October?
Well, of course, the best case scenario would be that the withdrawal bill or withdrawal agreement as it is accepted, but there is no prospect that this happens, with the present government and parliament has rejected it twice. So I think in the medium term, the best perspective would be to extend the negotiating period, to give more time to achieve an agreement which at least covers Northern Ireland and allows us to retain the contacts to the other part of Ireland.
Now, Prof, do you think that British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has a leg to stand on with the crisis that's taking place currently?
Well, that is really difficult to say because he has refused to stand down. And then the alternative is a vote of no confidence, which will lead immediately to a general election. And we can see the election rhetoric turning up in the House of Commons already. So everybody who's against him is a traitor. And he will drive the election campaign with this rhetoric saying, you have prevented Brexit on the 31st of October, and I'm securing Brexit for the 31st of October. That's why he won the election before that date. And so the best solution would be if he agrees a caretaker government until the Brexit proposal is agreed, and then a general election. But that's also presently difficult to happen. Sorry that I don't have more concrete ideas. My best idea would be he stands down, a caretaker government takes over, secures the relationships with the EU, tells the EU, we need a general election. You can see that. And give us more time, because after the general election, we will hopefully have a different majority in the parliament and then can renegotiate and get a better withdrawal agreement, which will also pass the House of Commons and the European Parliament as well. That would be the best solution.